welcome. In this video, I want to discuss the role of influence, okay, by way, again, of a express state. Again, I talk about the difference between, again, we hear dog trainers attempt to define, okay, the relationship, okay, as it relates to control. Okay, and again, this is why I talk about some of the terminology being used by trainers in a very superficial way, okay, where it doesn't actually connect to and with the relationship that way, by way of the state of mind of a dog. And again, when I talk about this, again, when I use a reference point in terms of the parenting example, in terms of the dynamic between a parent-child relationship, even in terms of, depth of relationship, okay, so same thing, we talk about, a behavior, okay, and again, this is one of the real problems in the dog training world. We're trying to understand when I'm talking about, even when trainers talk about behavior, and really think about this too, because I'll talk through this. This will be a helpful video. I talk about, your dog trainers talk about that a behavior, the likelihood, by rewarding the likelihood that a behavior will happen again. They're typically, when they use that word, they're associating with a response. Okay, say the behavior being a sit. Okay, but here's the problem with that. Okay, when you use certain terms in the dog training world and they attach the word behavior associate with a response, okay, it's superficial in the sense that it's simply a response. Okay, they don't actually, make the connection at a relationship level to say, okay, what is a response or a behavior? What does it actually mean? Like does it actually represent in terms of the perceptions of a dog? How do you actually qualify or establish that at a response level, that those responses, okay, when they're happening, when they're being motivated the way trainers are motivating a response, that they actually represent that the perceptions of a dog are actually changing? Well, they're not. Okay, understand, they're not establishing anything that way because they're not connecting dots to the relationship that way, period. So when I talk about the core ingredients, okay, this is where you get in this thing about influence and control. Okay, and this is where you got to really have to apply critical thinking. I have one person I'm helping, and they have they're doing all these notes, they have their book, and they're going through, they're writing everything down, and that's great. I mean, but here's part of the problem, okay? And again, this is where it's really helpful to go to the parenting example. I talk about sorting through how labels are applied, how terms are used in the dog training world. When you hear this word behavior being used, a lot of times it's completely disconnected from the relationship. It's just, when trainers are using the word behavior, they're talking about just a response, a superficial response, like a dog doing a sit. And this is where all this thing about learning theory is used, and it doesn't even apply. That's why I talk about, training is not a learning-based exercise the way that's applied that way. How it's framed up that way through, within the framework of response. Okay, so understand, you have to take this right down to a base level, is what is training? Okay, you have to connect some dots here. What is training? Training is not a learning-based exercise once a relationship problem is underway. And again, going back to the parenting example, once a child has become selfish, see, that's the point you need to kind of hover at and stop right there. Okay, once a child's become selfish, and then look at the social aspect of the relationship, you stop right there and say, okay, what is it? What is a relationship problem? What is it? What path does it take in terms of change? In terms of the parental role, is it a learning-based exercise, or is it an intervention? Well, it's an intervention. Okay? And then bring that word behavior in. The word behavior, does it apply when you're describing of getting a selfish child to respond? Well, that word doesn't really fit the right way, the way it's being used in the dog training world. Those responses that are being generated don't always represent that the perceptions of a child are changing if you're motivating those responses the way that you're doing it using a motivating agent without with the parental role totally not lined up properly, okay? In terms of a parent's level of engagement, how they're interacting with. So understand that word behavior itself is superficially used and oftentimes totally out of context in the dog training world. Okay, let's start there. The word behavior doesn't even fit. Okay, when I hear trainers use that word behavior, I'm like, that word doesn't even belong in the context of how they're motivating responses. Okay, we have to kind of get that kind of sorted out first. Then we talk about, and this is where then we have to get this whole issue about, and this is the confusion in the dog training world. What's the role of influence itself by way of correcting a dog? Right? So you have this kind of problem here with how trainers are engaging a relationship problem without even understanding what a process even is to begin with. Then the role of influence itself. And this is where you get into this problem of correcting a dog and then changing the focus of a dog, right? By way of, say, using a treat or even using certain devices that will restrain the dog. And then we get into this thing about conditioning itself, repetition, conditioning a response, but those responses, without the core ingredients there, those responses typically don't represent that the perception of dogs are changing. See, I understand there's all this mess of the dog training world. Understand that you have to start, when you get into this thing, I talk about this. The problem here in the dog training world is so many people are so focused on this idea that trains a learning-based exercise that's the bad starting point. And so when you start to talk about conditioning, you start to talk about using certain devices. I talk about the role of influence, in terms of interrupting a dog's state of mind through an express state. See, that's the problem. We talk about, so when trainers they're not dialed into a dog's state of mind that way to even define, beyond just using how they use the word behavior in a superficial way, to establish just like a selfish child. Once a child has become selfish, that's how selfishness is being expressed, okay, through certain behaviors, right? Think about this. But does the word behavior really belong? Oftentimes it doesn't belong in how you're thinking about and engaging in terms of your role, just like the parental role, right? In terms of changing perceptions, right? Parental influence. It's like the same thing when I talk about intercepting the role of influence by way of a correction. Well, it has to actually intercept the express state. Okay, it has to actually interrupt it. You have to intercept it. Versus changing focus. Changing focus by way of using a treat. The majority of trainers still think that when you change the focus, that still does the same thing. You're still effectively, changing behavior. In reality, you're not. Okay, it'd be the same thing as shifting the focus. I made this point, shifting the focus of a selfish child by way of hauling a chocolate bar out of your just out of nowhere, right? And the child's focus shifts as they're mouthing off at you. You hold a chocolate bar up in the air, you shifted their focus. So ask yourself the question: does that represent that the attitude of the child is getting better in that moment? Can you trust that moment of that focus shifting towards a chocolate bar? Is that moment itself where this focus shifts? Is that actually a calm moment in the sense of that the child's attitude's changing? Absolutely not. But understand, this is where the dog training world is built on this, right? It's inherently flawed. So I know I'm going through a lot here, right? And but my encouragement to anybody that's watching my video content to understand that the whole core premise of what training is in the dog training world is inherently flawed at the beginning. Okay, so when I talk about conditioning, when I talk about the role of influence, I talk about even the term behavior is applied or misapplied, right? All those things are all part of that. Okay, and it can be very confusing for people if your foundation is wrong. Okay, understand, and it is. The majority of trainers, the whole foundation is wrong. So my encouragement is to watch my videos. I got a ton of information available, but you need to think differently than what the dog training world is marketing. Okay, that's my thing. Because here's the thing: is that this all relates to the blame shifting and why the picture within the framework of response, the picture that's being painted, okay, by trainers, and you get your certificate, and the relationship hasn't actually changed for the better at all. Even though dogs are moving around, responding, and this word behavior is brought into the equation, and it doesn't even belong because these dogs are just responding. But the core ingredients that are necessary, influence and control, are absent, and so perception of dogs aren't actually changing because you're not approaching it by way of an intervention and taking the path of a type of power play. Okay, I talk about this, so there's a lot to kind of think about, but I would encourage anyone. Okay, I'm kind of really giving you a really kind of crash course within 11 minutes that you have a lot to think about. But that's what's going on. Okay, I understand that. I can go through all this stuff and break it down, but my encouragement is understanding what training is and what it isn't. The 99% of dog trainers out there are approaching training for what it isn't. And then you wonder why all these problems. Even balanced dog trainers are bringing in influence into the equation by way of corrections. A lot of times it's not coming in the right way, by way of the right method, the right level of engagement through a intentional interaction-based method. So it's the ability to even change the perception of dogs at the level needed isn't even there. Okay, so they end up in the same place oftentimes, a little bit above what we call force-free training, but sometimes not at all. It's a type of spectrum. I talk about that. So again, my encouragement is check my website. Lots of great information. I have, again, courses there that I've made available. The first course I have is called the Introduction to the Relational Approach course. That's a really great foundational course to take for some deeper insight into all these things I'm talking about. Okay, help you understand about how it all plays off of the right foundation. So you check it out. Course available on my website. Thanks for watching.